Hello everyone, I'm Digital Monkey, and boy do I have a good one for y'all today. I don't want to spoil the speed paint too much in the introduction, so I'm just gonna get right into it. Yeah, so basically I'm leaning really hard into my beloved fantasy aesthetics with this one. The other day I was reflecting on my history with creating OCs and how they haven't really stuck with me because of the genre I've been creating them in, which is mostly just like modern day, real world stuff, which isn't that interesting to me. And I've also been thinking about how I've been wanting to do more stuff with character design rather than fan art. So here we are. I've landed upon the idea of creating fantasy characters based off of flowers. Although it's a fairly basic idea, yes, for sure, no other art YouTuber has done a video about turning a thing into another thing. Definitely not. It's a broad concept I think I can do a lot with. And it's in a genre I love, which is fantasy. I can talk a bit more on that, just like my fantasy inspirations, but for now I want to talk a little bit on my process. So getting right into it, you can see that I imported a sketch from my sketchbook so that I can identify a proper silhouette and colors from the reference photo of the lilac that I put up. Very messy sketch, but yeah, I'll throw it on screen if anyone wants to take a closer look. Although it's messy, it's super helpful in figuring out how I wanted to do this character. I settled on lilacs for the first character because 1, they make me nostalgic. 2, they're my favorite spring-ish? early summer, spring flower, and I've been wanting to see more of them recently. And 3, the color palette and shape language makes for a really fun character designing challenge. Also, lilacs and gooseberries, anyone? Me when she smells like lilacs and gooseberries? If you know, you know. When it comes to designs, I was really thinking about how to incorporate the shapes of the flowers into a dress, because I immediately thought of like whimsical, magical princess as a valid course of design. The most obvious lilac-like parts are the headpiece and earrings, which are a little hard to see right now, but will be a bit more apparent when I add color, and the short overskirt, if that's what you can call it, on the dress. These two elements sort of mimicked the overall shape of the flower, while I chose puff sleeves and braids to represent the more teardrop or ovular shape of the individual petals on each smaller flower, which comprises the whole lilac bush. Even if it doesn't read that way, I don't care because I love an excuse to make fun fantasy clothing. I also looked into the symbolism a bit, not sure how accurate it is because it's coming from Pinterest, but everyone loves Pinterest, so I'm using it as well. But I read that lilacs can represent love and remembrance, so I initially went for a heart-shaped cutout/boob window. Really represents love and remembrance, doesn't it? But it was difficult for me to make that match up with the puff sleeves because the two kind of overlap each other, so it didn't turn out really looking like a heart, but the intention is there, if not the execution. I also saw that the name lilac originates from a Greek legend about Syrinx and Pan. The details are a bit murky, sorry, but that helped me decide on the shoes as I landed on sandals similar to those often worn in ancient Greece. Yep, that's about the only sort of semi-historical reference I put into this. Everything else is just whatever I want it to be fantasy. I was initially going to go for either heels or big sleigh boots, but thinking on her character a little bit more, I felt like this character would be spending a lot of time outside, like frolicking and daydreaming and whispering sweet nothings as one does as a princess in a largely ambiguous and undetailed fantasy land. So I landed on the sandals. Please don't come for me for creating a character based off of a flower and then deciding her hobby is being outside. I know it's basic, okay? It's the first one that I'm doing in this series, so I'm allowed to be basic. Mom said it's my turn creating basic personalities for my characters. Anyways, I finished off the design with some like flowy sleeves and an open front skirt because I can, and my inspirations for Pinterest were just so good. Thank you, Pinterest, really putting in the work for me. I love to make Pinterest boards, it's like so fun. Incidentally, if anyone has any interest in seeing the Pinterest boards I make to create these characters, I'm totally willing to share them. I've actually only recently started doing them in any detail, just with these character designs especially, but it's been really fun to reflect on where I get inspiration from and what sort of aesthetics I'm leaning into for any given piece. For this one, the board is pretty small because it's like my first time really getting into it, but a lot of the inspiration was like ball gown or ballerina type dresses with a lot of flowy sleeves and really cool embellishments. It was definitely a fun place to start inspiration wise. Overall, I'm super happy with this design, but I will say that the one thing that kind of gets to me is that a lot of the lilac elements also look like wisteria. I mean, yeah, they're pretty similar flowers, but I think I'll have to focus more on shape language in the future so that the characters are more clearly based on the flowers that I've chosen. On the flip side of that, I'm making fantasy characters out of flowers, so maybe I shouldn't care so much since it's fantasy and I can essentially make it what I want to be. Definitely that sort of debate that I'm having with myself. Speaking of fantasy, I wanted to kind of get into the lore I'm considering for this character and others in the design series. No promises, but I am thinking about making this a series because this one at least was really fun to draw. Actually, at the time I'm recording this voiceover, I have 3, including this one, 3 designs and speed paints that are completely done, and then I just have to do like the editing and the voiceover for those other 2. Anyways, take this all with a grain of salt because I'll likely be fleshing it out more in the future, but if I end up making a lot of these flower characters, I think it'd be really fun to make them into an in-world pantheon. Yeah, she's a princess and a goddess. What are you gonna do about it, huh? It's my world. I make it what I want it to be, so there. As I sort of alluded to earlier, the lilac character would be the goddess of like botany, nature, plants, things like that. I'm thinking something sort of similar to Persephone because Greek pantheon, but also because I've been playing the game Hades recently. I'm really trying to hold out for Hades 2 until it actually comes out because it's in early access right now, but oh, it looks so tempting. I want to play it. I'm thinking about giving this character a more specific discipline depending on how many characters I make in this world, because botany / nature / plants is just like really broad. Also sort of related, but not really. All this time I've been calling this character either this character or like the lilac character, which doesn't really do as a name. I was thinking about just referring to each character as their flower names, but that's also not very fun. So if anyone has any recommendations, they'd be much appreciated. Obviously, I like doing the character design part and I like thinking about lore, but when it comes to naming things, it's my weakness. If these characters get a little bit more fleshed out in the future, it'd be really fun to post character sheets and stuff like that so that people can get a greater look into each like deity's personality, discipline, things like that. For now though, I'm just gonna keep calling her as I have been in this video until I can think of a better name, or one of you can think of a better name. So as you can see here, I'm beginning to render the head. I like to make the head bigger and render it separately so that I can get a more detailed look for the head, and then it's an extra element on the page that I think adds to the overall look of the character design. I've only started doing this with my recent illustrations / character designs, but I really do like it. I had a lot of fun rendering the face and the hair. I mean, it's always my favorite part, but this one especially was just so good. For one thing, choosing a purple tone for the shading, I think really well sort of made the blending process easy. Then I went in and redrew some features of the face, namely the eyes and the nose, so that they wouldn't get so muddled by the painting process. This is pretty much the only case in which I'll definitely keep line art on a separate layer, because if I merge the eye and nose line art down, it just gets so messy. Other than that though, I pretty much prefer to paint everything on one layer because then I don't have to think too hard about where elements of the illustration are. As for the hair, I sort of ended up making the bangs a different shape than what I had intended in the sketch, but I'm not mad because I think it ended out looking pretty good. Once again, I stuck with a purple for the shading because yeah, continuity. Since the bangs turned out differently than I had originally planned, as you'll see a bit later in the video, I was sort of wondering how to incorporate the headband part of the lilac headpiece. I was like, should it be placed over the bangs, under the bangs, both? In the end, I think it turned out pretty good, and I really enjoyed the overall look of the whole headpiece, but especially the lilacs. I think the shape of the lilacs there turned out really interesting and just added a lot to the head/hair. During the process of painting the face and hair, I tend to jump around a lot since my attention span is kind of short when it comes to art. As you can see, I zoom in and zoom out so much, maybe too much, which is sort of annoying to watch when the video is sped up like it is now. I'm trying not to do that too much in the future, but one thing I have gotten better at since recording these speed paints is rotating the canvas. I used to rotate way too much, so watching my speed paints from back then was very disorienting. But now I think it's much better. Back to the process though, I'm starting to render the lilac earrings, braids, and lilac headpiece. As I discovered during this part, there's a very fine line between having the earrings look like lilac and having them look like a bunch of grapes. Oopsie. I tried to add more detail to the earrings than I have in the skirt, just because I wanted to render the head in more detail, but I'm sort of conflicted about how they turned out. Let me know what you think, because I'm honestly still not really sure. As for the braids, I had to redraw them a couple times, and I kept the overall shape pretty simple. I was originally worried about painting braids because I don't think I've ever done it before, but I think for my first time they look pretty good. If you're an artist, shapes really are your best friend. Thank you, shapes. Once the head has been completely rendered, now it's a matter of copying and pasting the head onto the full body illustration and then making sure all the elements match up correctly. So I painted the rest of the braid, changed their shape where necessary, and then it's just a matter of adding final touches. I like adding some outlines to elements in the illustration that are next to colors kind of similar to each other. For example, I outlined the hands since the color of the skin is kind of hard to see up against the dark purple of the sleeves. Even in areas of large contrast between colors, I still like to do this on occasion as it gives me a last-minute opportunity to add some vibrant or fun colors, and I think it adds a lot to the overall look of the piece. Sometimes though, it feels like my art process is really unintuitive because I put so much effort into painting over my original line art / sketch, only to add an outline at the very end. But honestly right now, I'm sort of the opinion that if it works, it works. Even as I've been working on my flower series illustrations, I've noticed that I've gotten a lot faster at doing everything. This piece took me about 4 hours, I think, which at least for me is pretty short. Moving on though, from there I added some interesting textures, such as the dot texture on the inside of the sleeves, and then I mess around with areas I want to be glowy. And then as you can see, I'm adding a very simple background, messing around with lighting, just some really last minute additions like this white outline. And from there, I think that's about the final piece. I'm really happy with the way that this turned out, and I'm really excited for the rest of the illustrations I have planned. I have 2 done as of the time of this voice recording, and I feel like each time I do it, I just have more and more ideas and it gets a lot better. But yeah, that's the final piece. I hope you all enjoy, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!